to stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please read item B.
Agenda item B is the construction of the Shepard to Rollins East-West Connection Trail Project.
Staff, please.
This project is an extension of the Hinkson Creek Trail, providing an east-west connection from near the MU campus and downtown business district across the Hinkson Creek. Per council direction, staff contracted with a consultant to conduct a study of alternate alignments for the east side of Hinkson Creek connection. I would like to introduce John Zimmerman from our consultant Trans Systems to give a short overview of the alignment study.
Questions?
I think we're getting a presentation.
Okay.
Hi, I'm John Zimmerman. I was a study manager for this study. We had a public engagement meeting on January 26th. We had more than 185 people that attended. We received more than 200 pieces of correspondence and comments. The study itself was 4 alignments between Hinkson Creek and Old 63 to improve active transportation in that area. This map shows the 4 alignments that we looked at. The area west of the creek, connecting the Rollins Street and William Street intersection to the creek, that was studied by the city, so that was excluded from our study. But we looked at the 4 alignments east of that. Alignment 1 starts at the bridge over the Hinkson, connects into Bluffdale Drive. We did include a sidewalk for the pedestrian component to connect to Old 63. Alignment 2 went from the bridge almost due east up the hill, connected to Old 63 by Shepard Boulevard. Alignment 3 went from the bridge south through the sanitary sewer easements and the opening as best we could along Hinkson Creek. Because of the bluffs in the area, we had to cross the creek twice, so that's why there's 2 bridges before it connects into the Grindstone Creek Trail, just west of Old 63. Alignment 4 was an independent alignment, and basically was either a sidewalk or a pedway for the pedestrians that connected the pedway on Old 63 to the sidewalk on Ashland Road. We looked at 3 criteria to judge the alignments against each other. The first one was mode shift, and we looked first at walking, getting people out of cars into walking to commute or get to school. Based on the National Household Travel Survey conducted by the Department of Transportation, most people will go about a half mile to 3/4 of a mile before they would prefer to just go ahead and drive that distance. Because the 3 alignments to the north all exceeded that distance, there would be basically very little mode shift responsible from pedestrians. So on alignment 4, that one was short enough that there would be some, but because the origins and destinations in that area were so limited for that distance, we negated the walking mode shift. And we focused mainly on bicycling. According to that same survey, 3.5 miles is the magic number to get people out of their car and walking. Anything more than that is just too long. Based on the pilot program studies that were done in Columbia and in the other cities, Columbia's average trip was 7 miles. But that included recreational trips, which tend to be longer, and they don't contribute to mode shift as much as the commuting trips. So we settled on 5 miles as kind of a compromise to that distance. That fell right in line with the average commute time in Columbia, which is 16 minutes, so we felt very good about that. What we did then was we went through each alignment, branched out on existing and proposed bike facilities, and looked at the service area, who would be served by these, and developed from the city's GIS land use mapping an approximate number of dwelling units that would be served by each of these alignments, and that's what we used to look at the mode shift potential. We also looked at the environmental impacts and the considerations, especially through the Hinkson Creek corridor. This is a very sensitive area, so we looked at the creek impacts, the forest impacts, environmental regulations and permitting, as well as endangered species. And again, rated those against the other alignments. And then finally, we looked at cost. We knew the budget on the project was about $1.7 million, and we looked at each alignment, put a cost to that, and then ranked those together. A lot of this information was shared at the public meeting. This is kind of a summary of those comments, and again, you've received all of the comments that we received in your packet. One of the overriding themes of the meeting was that a large majority wanted options 1 and 3 combined. But otherwise, these are the comments that you've already seen. We then rated each of the alignments from very poor to very good. Basically, the more green dots, the better the alignment performed. So in the mode shift potential, environmental considerations, construction cost estimate, you can see that each alignment scored good in at least one of the categories, except for alignment 2, which was fair in the all 3. And alignment 1 scored well in each category. It was probably the most balanced. So based on that, our technical recommendation is alignment 1. There's that sidewalk that's involved with it that goes through the neighborhood. We do see that as an option. We do recommend to consider it further, but it is an option. Alignment 2 could be used in a future development on that private property if it wants to go forward. Alignment 3 could be a phased extension of alignment 1. And then alignment 4 could be considered to be combined either with the existing Stadium and Old 63 intersection project or a standalone project in the future. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Council questions? Carl?
Yeah, just one question. I assume that options 1, 2, and 3, not 4, but those other 3, all involve a high water bridge at one point to cross the creek. Is that right? And then there's some other bridges as well. So
that is correct.
And on option 2, that was the option that representatives from surrounding neighborhoods walked and sort of selected. And although it was more on the gas easement, so less trees would have to be removed. I remember walking it with you and asking you if it could be shifted over, and you told me that it was rerouted because of the slope, to try to get a gradual 5% slope. But you did say that it could go a little on the north part. It could have gone on the gas easements, but you didn't consider that, right?
Yes, we did look at that. We could push it a little farther to the north to go on that gas easement, but the more we did that, the steeper the grades became. So in the end, we went with the alignment that was included in the report.
And in terms of the mode shift with walking, I was surprised about that because I know the residents of Shepard Boulevard are just dying to walk down there to East Campus. So I know your national standards say a half a mile, but after the IP meeting, I talked with residents of all ages, and they were all saying, oh, sure, I would walk that in a minute. But you don't have any backup estimates for, or figures for that. It wasn't calculated in this, right?
I believe the pilot program had 3/4 of a mile as the average trip for walking.
Okay.
And 7 miles for biking.
Any other questions? Any other questions of staff?
In calculating the mode shift for option 3, did you consider the future connection of the Grindstone Trail, which is going to go east from the Hinkson Trail, just south of Stadium, and connect to a very large student housing complex at the intersection of Stadium and Highway 63?
Yes, we considered all existing and proposed alignments.
Okay, so that housing was part of the calculation of mode shift for option 3?
Yes.
Okay.
No other questions? Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Prescott? Not?
like
ahead.
to mention, I would really like to make a motion now before the hearing for an amendment to option 1 to remove the sidewalk for a bike lane on Southwood and part of Bluffdale. Originally, a week before the IP meeting, they had the sidewalk on Woodley. There was no sidewalk before, and it was always a bike lane. This is a very quiet neighborhood. The homes on Southwood have very short yards. Some of them have very mature trees. One woman wrote, who doesn't use email because she's older, and wrote me a letter, and I just wanted to read one paragraph from it, who's on Southwood. I will lose several things that have meaning for me and cannot be replaced. I will lose the maple tree that my late husband planted years ago, the holly bush that came from his family home, jonquils that came from my grandparents' home. The flower bed near the street is lined with bricks that my husband laid, and it's a very narrow area. The consultant has said that the option without sidewalks but a bike lane will work well, will be safe. Shepard Boulevard, which has much more heavy traffic, has a bike lane on it. So I'd like to make that amendment to option 1 to be considered.
I'll be happy to second that. Bluffdale, Southwood, and Woodley are all contained streets. There's no through traffic. The only automobile traffic is going to the homes there. I don't think that a sidewalk is necessary on those streets. It causes excessive additional disruption to those homeowners. And by not building the sidewalk, I understand we'll save about $140,000 on option 1, so I'll be happy to second
We
it.
have a motion second to delete the sidewalks from option 1. Any more discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion passes 6-0. We'll open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak?
Good evening, Council. My name is Ryan Quaid. Address is 4308 Savannah Court. As an Eagle Scout who did a study on trees as part of my project, I support Alignment 4 for several reasons, including the environmental impact of the other alignments. Alignments 1, 2, and 3 all have the potential to harm the Hinkson Creek. The benefits? A handful of bikers that will be able to use a trail that, in the cases of Alignment 2 and 3, would cost between double and triple the cost of Alignment 4. Bikers are typically middle income to high income. This would not benefit the low income that cannot afford bikes. This has been proven in Minnesota, where they use their federal money to buy and loan out bikes to the underprivileged. Only Alignment 4 would support the underprivileged. All other alignments would support only the upper class. Furthermore, studies have shown most bikers are between 5 and 15, and yet these alignments are planning to go to the university. Who is the demographic market for this mode shift? Who is really going to use it? There are students on the end of Stadium that would use Alignment 4, but when you look at the demographics of the neighborhoods of Rollins and Shepard, I believe they do not support Alignments 1, 2, and 3. How many people in Shepard are going to the university? A handful of upper-income professors? Maybe. There certainly aren't many students riding bikes. The cost benefit is just not there for Alignments 1, 2, and 3. However, Alignment 4 has low costs but great benefits. It does not have either the financial or environmental impact. It also benefits both pedestrians and bikers, whereas other alignments benefit bikes specifically. I travel this route on Stadium every Tuesday and Thursday, and every single time I see both bikers and pedestrians using the existing pedway. No doubt, with the improved safety proposed with Alignment 4, this direct route would allow both bikers and pedestrians a great route to the university and downtown. As I take college classes, my peers and I agree that the most direct route is a preferred route. Again, if your targeted audience is students, and I assume it is, then alignment 4 is the best option. It has less environmental impact, it is a more direct route, and it can be safe. It benefits both pedestrians who maybe can't afford, or in the case of wheelchairs, cannot use bikes, and bikers alike. Now, according to the Get About Trail pamphlet published last year, the trail on Stadium is a low-risk transport area. Low risk. It means you don't need a lot of skill. And with alignment 4,
15 seconds.
Even more safe and aesthetically pleasing. Using the plans with alignment 4, more people will travel the trail due to it being aesthetically pleasing, safe, and direct route. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi again, Annette Triplett, Executive Director, PetNet Coalition, 201 West Broadway. I'm going to pull up a quick presentation here.
Can you do it in 3 minutes?
5 minutes for representing an organization, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Thank you. PetNet Coalition is a nonprofit organization that promotes active transportation through advocacy and educational programming. We work to make it easier for people to be able to walk, bike, use a wheelchair, or public transit for transportation. We are a member-based coalition, and through our memberships for individuals, families, clubs, organizations, and businesses, we represent approximately 4,000 people here in Columbia. On behalf of PetNet and our members, I would like to speak strongly in favor of the Shepard to Rollins Trail, and specifically options 1 and 3. The slide shows our existing trail system with current trails in red and a purple overlay indicating areas of the city that are within a half a mile of the trail. You can see that right now we have a hole that the Shepard to Rollins Trail will fill. This trail is one of the most important connectors for our entire trail system. While relatively short, this trail is crucial to bridge the gap between all the trails that converge near this area but are not currently connected. These include the Hinkson Creek Trail, which connects to the MU Recreational Trail, to the MKT, to the Katy, the Grindstone Creek Trail, the Moon Valley Trail Connector to the Hominy Trail, Stevens Lake Park Trail, and the planned future extension of the Hinkson Creek Trail farther north. This trail will provide critical connectivity to the MU campus, the district, and our downtown area, which is the major economic hub of our community. We have a giant hole in our trail network, and where we have a hole, we also have a hill. This giant hill on Old 63 is a major barrier to mode shift to non-motorized transportation. Mode shift is a requirement for, for the use of the Get About funds proposed to fund this project. This graph shows the elevation of the trail route if you were to travel to this area by starting at the MKT Trail and then taking the MU Recreational Trail to the Hinkson Creek Trail. The hill on Old 63 is over 110 feet tall, and it is a mammoth compared to the other elevation changes along this trail route. The issue with having a hill on a major road in the middle of our trail network is not just convenience. It can also be a safety issue for people moving very slowly on a bike or on a wheelchair on the side of the road on the climb up, and also controlling the speed of the descent on the way down. The engineering study that the city had done on these trail alignments bears this out. Of the 4 alignments, options 1 and 3 provide the flattest grade, while option 4 is the steepest. Similarly, options 1 and 3 serve the highest number of people, therefore they have the highest potential for mode shift. The engineering study found that option 4 would have a negligible effect on mode shift for either people walking or biking. Some opponents of the trail claim that the trail would destroy a pristine nature area. Many of you have walked the proposed routes and I think have found for yourselves that this is not quite the full story. The area of option 1 and option 3 had major land clearing done for gas and sewer trunk line decades ago. There is in effect a trail already there. It's simply not accessible by the rest of the trail system. We want to emphasize the fact that there is wide community support for this. At the IP meeting, over 200 comments were received, and over 75% of them were in support of options 1 and 3. Also, your engineering study gives you the data to show that options 1 and 3 are a good option. Also, your city commissions have supported this. The Disabilities Commission, the Public Transit Advisory Commission, Parks and Rec, Bike and Pedestrian, and Board of Health have all supported options 1 and 3. And finally, 70% of Columbia households use the trails. This is not a fringe project which benefits a small number of people. The best route for this trail is a package of options 1 and 3. This route will provide the most mode shift, service the greatest population, provide the most ease of use by avoiding steep grades, and will follow existing utility lines. We strongly urge you to approve options 1 and 3 and direct staff to determine the best funding source or combination of funding sources to fully fund this route. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Troy Balthazar, 3615 Chatham. Here tonight with PedNet, but I'm also with the University of Missouri's College of Human Environmental Services. I want to discuss some issues related to disability in regard to trail development. Certainly can't speak for all people with disabilities. People have different desires, different recreation ideas, different transportation ideas. But I think it's interesting to hear the concern for people with disabilities when we've got the highest hill the remaining within the network sitting there on Old 63. There are three things that are at the top as far as benefiting people with disabilities, especially wheelchair users and people who are aging. And I challenge anyone to say that these are not factual and best practices for people who use wheelchairs. The first thing is to consider the slope, minimizing slopes where we can. We certainly can't be bubble level everywhere, but we can minimize slopes and maximize participation. It's also an important issue for how welcoming the trail is for anybody besides extremely strong bicyclists. One thing that that they don't see, people don't see, is lots of people in wheelchairs going up that hill because it's unusable. Secondly, separation and safety. Getting people, first of all, out of the streets, then away from the streets. You cannot argue that it is safer to be anywhere near the street for a wheelchair user or children than it is to have a dedicated and separated route for them to travel. So it's a matter of separation and safety there. Thirdly, program accessibility. We need to, as we use this public funding, think about how we're going to make it most usable by people with disabilities, not based on speculation, not based on one person's personal idea of how they'd like to see things, but what's on best for the community and based on best practices. Program accessibility means that people will have access to the trail network and outdoor recreation. Options 1 and 3 clearly make the most of these opportunities of all 4 options that are available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings and thanks to my fellow bike commuters, nature lovers, community organizers, city planners, and civic leaders.
Please give your name and address, please.
Badger Johnson, 105 3rd Avenue. I'll get right to the main points and then expound upon them. Number 1, let's not vote tonight so neither side becomes embittered. 2, let's support the leadership of PedNet and its wild nature in finding a win-win scenario. About point 1, not voting tonight. If the ecologically minded folks of Como get estranged from each other because of one party pressing their advantage before consensus is reached, the social capital available to future community organizers on related issues will be depleted by the weakening of our ecologically minded constituency. That concerns me. So please imagine this with me now. It is completely possible that all stakeholders on this issue can work on making it right with each other. If we can do this in eschew antagonism and trust in the process, we'll all come out feeling more cooperative and empowered than before. I know it's been a hard and long hashing this out, but let's go once more around the track. If we step out of the socially pressurized box this conflict is created by ceasing to imagine that bikers and preservationists are batting for different teams, then we can think out of the box and figure this out. We're all pro-tree and urban ecosystem services. We're all pro-bicycle and bicyclists. We're in it together, so let's win it together. Second point, supporting the leadership of PedNet and its wild nature in finding a win-win-win scenario. Framing this as nature versus bikes or bikes as merely an economic development strategy is not holistic. We can all agree about the pressing need for making the streets hospitable to cyclists and about preventing more and costly road building and loss of urban ecosystem services. The contention comes from the fact that most of us bike commuters don't want to be on highways if we can help it. This is why I'm not 100% sold on option 4, though I favor it over the others as they stood before the motion was passed for eliminating sidewalks on option 1. I don't yet know how this issue will be resolved, but I had an idea. If we use a fraction of the get-about funds earmarked for concrete laying to build parking lots and or driveways for people who want them in the neighborhood by the sanctuary, instead of making more bike trail through the woods, we could reduce the need for on-street parking and perhaps take one side of the street for bikes. We paint some sharrows like on the Ash Street Bikeway and in general encourage safe vehicle ergonomics. Option 1 currently has the feel of eminent domaining people's front yards. Again, I read this before that option was passed, which is not acceptable. Then again, cutting a bunch of big trees down, running a 10-foot concrete bike trail with big enough shoulders for
15
bulldozers
seconds.
sounds more like a bike road. Subsequent soil compaction and the effects of the edge effects on the forest ecosystem bear considering. Let's utilize the existing infrastructure intelligently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Elijah Gursky. My address is 109 Westridge Drive.
Go ahead. Okay.
Option 4 offers more. Come back to nature. Option 4. Okay, so I'm in favor of option 4. I'm worried that the other options 1 and 3 will cause erosion. It's already kind of sliced off, like it's like one of those classroom models of soil and stuff. Like, anyway, so I think option 4 is best because it doesn't cause much disruption and erosion. It might cause a little bit. I'm not a trail hater. I love trails. Trails are great. I'm kind of worried about the placement of the other options, but I think that option 4 will do. I think it'll do its job well. So, yeah, it's a beautiful place. I don't want it to get ruined. I definitely like bike trails. That's the bottom line. Yeah, vote option 4. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pothole, and I
3 minutes? Perfect.
And as she spoke about the beautiful property that option 4 will not ruin, this will show it. Nature sanctuary and safer biking routes promise to improve our quality of life. Both involve the 35-acre tract of land cradling the Hinkson Valley between Broadway and Stadium, which is in this film. And there's a better way to do both with option 4.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charlie Nylund. I live at 1303 Parkers Drive, and I'm speaking as a citizen in Columbia, but also I'm a wildlife biologist at the University of Missouri in Fisheries and Wildlife. And what I'd like to speak about really is in favor of option 4. I'm doing that primarily because I've had a chance to visit the site. It's our wild nature site as well as much of the area along the floodplain in both the power line easement and the gas easement. And my concern is that the 35-acre site, it's our wild nature site, is a site that's a relatively intact second-growth forest. It has some fairly large trees, provides habitat for a variety of birds, reptiles and amphibians, small mammals, and so on. And the concern I have is that a big part of managing biodiversity and managing in cities is not just the areas that, say, the Columbia Natural Resource Inventory talks about, but it's also the places that are embedded in neighborhoods. And my concern is that Columbia is really a very strong, very excellent trail system. At times, the dialogue about it tends to say impacts don't matter and they don't impact nature. And I'd like to encourage you to remember that a number of species do respond to trails. A number of species do respond to construction, and that careful consideration, that's important. So based on that, I recommend option 4. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Stansfield. I live at 1852 Cliff Drive. I'm also a professor at Mizzou, and in that capacity, I'm the faculty sponsor for the Mizzou race team. And our cycle park is in the university side of Hinkson back in there. We've got a dual slalom course, a cyclocross course, a downhill course. It's been a giggle. In that capacity, I've spent hundreds of hours in this area. On all of our construction that we've done, anytime we dig a hole, we realize that we're sitting on top of a landfill. So this land has been used before, sometimes well, sometimes short-sightedly, but it's anything but pristine nature. I'd like to emphasize my group's support for option 3 and option 1. One alternative, I hate to use the word option in there, that you might consider is instead of routing through the neighborhood in option 1, you really could stay on the west side of the mighty Hinkson. 95% of that part would be flat and buildable. You'd have just a tiny little bit you'd have to build a side slope for. Then you'd stay out of that neighborhood. You'd wouldn't hurt anybody's feelings. That'd be a positive thing to consider. Finally, with regard to option 4, a better workaround for that would be to go south on the creek 100 yards. There's an old antique bridge there, just needs a new deck. That'd be an infinitely more pleasant thing to ride up than whatever expensive improvement you want to do on the side of Stadium. And that gets you onto Ashland Gravel Road, and if you want to ride up a big hill to get to the university, you can. But in closing, I like option 3, option 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. It has been raised several times by both the council and by members in attendance.
Give your name and address, please.
Oh, I apologize. Jason Patry, 2800 Pepper Tree Lane. I was saying it's been raised a number of times that there's discussions about wanting to grow the community and attracting new residents to Columbia. I am here as a representative of one of those proverbial new residents. I'm here tonight representing my wife, who could not be here, and myself. We recently moved to your wonderful city just at the beginning of this new year. When we chose to come here, we relocated from the D.C. area, which is also a very large proponent of bicycle commuting. We decided to move here to be closer to family and to eventually start our own. When we were weighing options for deciding where we wanted to move to, we had here in Columbia, we had Kansas City, we had family in Dallas, Texas, we had family in Central Florida, upstate New York. We ultimately came here. One of the deciding factors that helped sway that decision was the knowledge of the extensive trail network and the support that this city has shown for it. The family that we have here views it basically as a selling point, knowing it as a weakness to myself as a cyclist. I'm here in support of options 1 and 3. In my opinion, they represent the best possible options for connecting, as the PedNet presentation demonstrated, the gap that exists currently within the trail networks that allow for transportation, not just recreation, but that mode shift, which is the whole objective of this federal grant. As someone who lives at the top of the old 63 Hill, I sympathize with anyone who is contemplating the idea of trying to commute on bike, but is hit with that as a barrier. Anytime we want to try and promote these kinds of shifts in behavior, removing barriers is what is needed. And this hill represents a massive barrier. Personally, I have no option but to go up it, but I know that when I move throughout other places in Columbia, when I move to settle here permanently on a more long-term basis and start my own family, I want to be able to transport them around the city in the most effective and easiest possible way. In closing, I'd just like to again encourage your support for voting for options 1 and 3, and I thank you for your time.
Could I ask you, where do you live again?
2800 Pepper Tree Lane.
Okay.
It's
in Shepard.
It's just off Shepard, yeah, South Audubon.
Thank you.
I am Gerald Newhard. I'm a professor of genetics at the University of Missouri, and I've lived in this area. My house that I built overlooks this whole area. And when I built the house, all you could see was pasture and some trees down in the valley. And now you can, in that house, you can, if the leaves are on the trees, you can't see anything but just the trees. So, but I know this area. I've lived there. My life has been saved by the fact that I walk to and from my home to the university almost every day when the water was down. Hide my boots in the leaves and enjoy it and pick them up on the way back. I can tell you that I've got lots of good friends who on all sides of this thing, and they're very nice people and they have good ideas. But I can tell you that I think that the best thing could happen if we build a trail there so that there won't be houses built down, a big bunch of apartment houses built down in there behind my house. I've lived there since in 58 years, and I'm in favor of 1 and 3, and I hope we'll be real careful with the people about number 1, that we don't damage their property, and we do everything we can to help them. And but I think it's a shame not to go ahead and do number 2 as well, because then it'll make it complete so the people up on the top of the hill can go down the hill past my house and then towards the university. And so I'm very much in favor of 1, 2, and 3. And I, Sue, I'm sorry, but I'm not very much in favor of 4.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Seth Smith, and I live at 108 North Greenwood Avenue. I wholeheartedly support the proposed options number 1 and 3 of the Grindstone to Stevens Trail link. I've been a Columbia resident for 15 years now. During that time, I've seen incredible improvements in the cycling and pedestrian infrastructure in town, most of them due to the hard work of the mayor, city council, PedNet, and Get About Columbia. On a personal level, I've been an avid cyclist and bike commuter for nearly 30 years and have used the current trail and the bikeway infrastructure extensively. I'm also the father of 2 little girls, aged 5 and 9, and during the warmer months, my wife and I spend a large amount of time pedaling out on the trails with our girls. We have the opportunity now to travel to Stevens Park from our neighborhood in the First Ward, which is our favorite park in town. From our home on the trail, it's a much safer option for us. I believe this link will allow safer transportation opportunities for Columbia residents, and it will also assist bike commuters heading to various areas of town. And as it currently stands, cyclists do have to travel up the large hill on Old Highway 63. I've never been averse to a good cycling climb, but that's much too much for most people, and especially for children, and is certainly deterrent for traveling that section. Anyway, I strongly encourage the mayor and the city council to move forward with the appropriating the funds to complete this vital Grindstone to Stevens Trail link.
Thank you.
Hello,
My name's Barbie Reed, and I live at 104 West Lathrop. I live in the second home from the Garth Trail connector that had issues years ago. In 2008, my old Southwest neighborhood, there were a lot of voices sharing concerns that are heard now from the residents of the Shepard to Rollins neighborhood concerning those trails. They were concerns about the cost of the trail, parking issues, safety, environment, and paving. We worked as a neighborhood. We had differing opinions. We worked as a neighborhood to improve the original plan, just as the Shepard to Rollins folks have kind of tweaked it a bit, made their voices known, and looking at compromises. Funding, this one of the concerns, funding, the money is there for both the connections. It's both there for option 1 and option 3. We only used, the funding is only to be used for paved trails. That's it. So we can't use it for some other kind of services and that kind of thing. The sidewalks were removed from the options, and so that saves us money. Parking, that was a big issue with our neighborhood because we live so close to the MU and the stadiums and all that. There's really been no increase. I was really concerned about that. There was really no increase despite the access. Safety was a concern, and the increase in usage by pedestrians and bikes actually increased the safety of our neighborhood and that area, because more folks they're outside in the environment, and they're looking out for our neighborhood. They're there. More people are there in that space. The environment was a concern. There's the access of more people to protect this corridor and the concerned area that was previously neglected. There's no homeless camps, and we are working to clean out invasives and planting native plants.
15 seconds.
We pushed, okay. I'll drop over, because our environment has been beautiful. It's a beautiful result. Paving was our biggest issue. Not everyone's happy with the paved trail, but the funding allows, that's all it allows.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Thank you.
Okay. We reduced it from 10 to 8 feet, and that made it much better.
Thank you.
Anyway, erosion would have been problematic.
Good evening. Thank you for the time. You heard from my dad earlier. I'm David Newford, 2003 Valley View Road. We moved there in 1957. At the time, there was probably 15 houses between Stadium, or what is Ash and Gravel, and Broadway on Old 63. We were one of the few. At that time, the field behind us, down the bottom of the Hingston, was mostly farmland. Mr. Shepard raised alfalfa on it, and he had cattle on it. Enough history. I think that the people that live up on what is Shepherd's Hills, Shepherd Boulevard, deserve the right or the access to come down across the Hingston, up what we used to call Pig Alley, now referred to as Rollins, with the bridge. That bridge would be a nice thing. I remember riding my bicycle all over Columbia delivering newspapers. I used to walk to and from high school when I went to University High School when it was still open. And then I went to Hickman, walked to High. I walked across that creek. They used to have a pipe there. All right, the environment down there has changed. But people need to be able to see it. That's why the ped trails are good. But we also need to do it the right way, to not negatively impact the quality of life of people who have spent their hard earnings to buy property and live. And I'm speaking of the people down on Bluffdale, that they have the right to have the same quality of life that they purchased when they bought there. I'm against that portion of option 1, that would run to Bluffdale. Option 2 and option 3, with the bridge across the Hinkson, would help the people who are up on Shepard Hill so they don't have to go down 63 to get to it. They can come down that hill there. The grade with a few switchbacks would not be that bad. I mean, I used to ride my bicycle up and down 63, and that's back when there was no hard shoulder. It was gravel or grass. So I'm in favor of option 3 and that part of 1, and 2, and that part of 1 that would not negatively impact the people on Bluffdale. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janine Pagan. I live at 701 Bluffdale Drive, and I came to speak in favor of the hill. The hill on Old 63 that everybody calls, so-called now, is the killer hill, has not killed anyone. The city has improved that immensely. There's bike lanes on either side of Old 63, and there's a lovely pednet trail, concrete sidewalk trail, and that's been used, and it connects from Broadway all the way down to Grindstone. It's used by a lot of students. It's used by a lot of people walking dogs. It's used by people going to work. People go to work or go to the university. They go down the hill, and then they even go up sometimes what they call Boone Hospital Hill. So sometimes hills are not necessarily a bad thing. They're actually used for a lot of things. That pedway has been used for people running, walking, people taking their babies out in strollers. Just recently, the Roots and Blues half marathon came up that hill. That was part of their route, and no one got hurt. And was that's the way they made that route for that. There are MUROTC runners who use that route. A lot of times on Saturdays, you'll see the multi-sport people use that route of that hill. So a lot of people appreciate that hill, and I don't think we should live in a hilly city and always try to focus ourselves on avoiding the hills. I mean, on the previous presentation, they talked about how they would make switchbacks on that hill over County House, and that seemed to be workable. I just think sometimes, maybe as you get more into bicycling, you can suck it up and learn how to ride a hill properly and safely, and that pednet alongside there is plenty long for people to be able to take children and not get into the street. So just so you can remind yourself that hill has not killed anyone. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan Harder. I live at 1803 Bluff Point Drive. I think my concern is that the city make use the best use of the funds they have. When I first saw the term Shepard or Rollins Trail, I was perplexed, and I was kind of confused. I thought, isn't that a cliff to the west of Shepard and Old Highway 63? I went out there and double-checked it, and it's not a cliff, but it's pretty steep. And I was still perplexed. I just don't think people coming definitely from the south, I just don't think they're going to go up the hill, go back down the switchbacks, over the creek, and then back up. I think they're going to bypass it. That was the first alternative for options 1 and 3. The second alternative that came up was option 4, and again, I'm nervous. I just want to make sure that it's an option that will get the most use. Coming from the south to the intersection of Stadium and Old 63, there is the old Ashland Gravel Road Bridge, and I see people use that all the time, and I wanted to double check it just to make sure that I wasn't missing something, and sure enough, bicycles rode right past me, and they went right over they go over that. There's no traffic on Ashland Gravel Road, so they're able to go right up there and then go right across the pedway. If option 4 comes along, I just have a feeling people are still going to bypass option 4 and take that route. Now, if options 1 and 3 are used, I definitely think people will can continue on, because they will bypass a lot of campus if they were to go all the way to Rollins Street to get to campus. So I just want to make sure that the city is making the best use of the funds they have, and that something that the most people will use. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Kelly Richter, and I'm a student living at 1301 Old Highway 63 South, which is right at the corner of Stadium and Old 63. And the trails are my favorite part about Columbia. I love being able to just step out of my door and I can ride 8 miles to my aunt's house, and we use the trails a lot together, and we really enjoy it. And because non-motorized transportation is really important to me, I do walk up that the stadium hill, and it's the issue of separation is a big one for me because the cars are less than an arm's length away from me and just flying by, and it's really unsettling a lot of times. And I know that if option 3 were to go through, I would definitely use that to get to campus. I'm definitely in favor of option 3. I know that I understand that wildlife do respond to the trails, but when I'm on the trails, I see a lot of wildlife, and I'd much rather there be that trail there than future student housing developments, because I know that the trails have helped to preserve a lot of land that's bordering them. So I'm in favor of option 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Charlotte St. John, 280 South Range Line Road. My main concern about any of the trail options except for option 4 is the trail's impact on the Hinkson Creek. A February 4th article in the Columbia Daily Tribune about the Department of Natural Resources report on the Hinkson Creek habitat assessment concludes the creek is still impaired. And the Clean Water Act states that every water body should be swimmable and fishable. There is a Hinkson Creek stakeholder group that Barbara mentioned that is a part of the collaborative action management process that gives the City of Columbia, Boone County, and MU a way to improve Hinkson Creek without using more drastic and potentially expensive pollution control measures. And yet, the trail proposal, the city project, goes against these efforts. It concerns me that trail planners seem to be ignoring the creek's critical condition. Any additional runoff caused by impervious concrete surfaces will only carry additional damaging pollutants into the creek. I've heard the argument the trails are commonly built along creeks, and just because it's been a common practice for years doesn't make it right. We no longer use lead paint because we learned it is harmful. We don't practice strip mining anymore because it is harmful. Runoff from concrete trails built along a creek is harmful, and we can stop it. I also wanted to share with the council some information that you may be aware of, but I wasn't, and I read this in the Scientific American about cement, so this applies to both cars and anything that's built with concrete. And I quote, "Cement, which is mostly commonly composed of calcium silicates, requires heating limestone and other ingredients to 2,640 degrees Fahrenheit by burning fossil fuels and is the third largest source of greenhouse gas pollution in the U.S., according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Making the 1 ton of cement results in the emission of roughly 1 ton of carbon dioxide, and in some cases much more." So we're all concerned about that, I think. I support people biking. I support people walking. I support the efforts to improve the conditions of the Hinkson Creek, and for those reasons, I support option 4. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Darcy Higgins of 105 3rd Avenue, and I teach environmental education. I have a small business of my own, and in fact, biked over to the Bluffdale neighborhood for much of this past fall and winter every Friday to lead a group of the children there in outdoor class. And I think that the temptation in the discussion of this trail is to characterize it as the same old arguments around every trail. A lot of people worried about the environment, a lot of people trying to make commuting possible, and we've had this argument. And I do want to emphasize that the area around Hinkson Creek that we're talking about is, I think, a different and particular place in Columbia. It's one of the largest remaining wild spaces in the city, and some people I've heard back and forth characterizing, oh, it's a beautiful sanctuary, or oh, it's, it's a piece of trash. There's only a bunch of trash cedars growing there. And yes, this is not perfect, pristine land, but nor does this make it a useless patch. Ecologically speaking, having a larger segment of undeveloped wild land is very significant, whatever stage of secession it's in. And as I said when we led class there, we were able to find many thriving ecosystems, and it is an important perch for species, as the wildlife biologist testified to, in the city. And I hope that I acknowledge the limitations of option 4, that it's not completely addressing all the hopes that we have for our infrastructure. But I do hope that if people see the uniquely investment of the community in this land, there are in fact many trails through there already that are accessible by foot. People use the space often. Again, it's not just a pile of weeds. And I hope that we continue to interact, whatever option is chosen, with the groups who are mobilized right now, are active, are strong and engaged here to take advantage of that enthusiasm as we put in the trail and afterwards, because there are people who are willing to put in the time to improve the space, remove the invasives, and really work hard on it. So a few people have mentioned the idea of the trail being necessary to allow children to access it or allow people to access the space, and I want to emphasize again that people are using it. I don't want to teach children that you need to have a concrete path in order to be able to have a connection with a space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie Now of 4926 Bethel Street. I'm just here to support options 1 and 3, and I'd also like to encourage council to direct staff to determine the best funding source for these trails. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Ellen Thomas, 2616 Hillshire Drive. I am a bicycle commuter, and I am outside, I guess, the typical one that the consultants took into account, because my commute is 7.5 miles if I take the shortest, most road-oriented route, but I often choose the 10-mile route because it is so much more pleasant. That involves, I live on the southwest side of town, I work on Keene Street on the east, and so that involves currently going over the big hill on Old 63. Now, I haven't always been a competent and confident bicycle commuter, and when I started doing this, I actually rode my bike from my house to the Grindstone Nature Area and loaded it on a bus and let the bus take me over the hill. And it was only after I had much more experience that I was able to tackle that hill. And I think that for many people today are like I was 15 years ago. And certainly my experience of riding with my children is that riding on steep hills next to traffic is frightening and daunting, and a lot of parents are just not going to do it with their children. I still don't always choose to come home that way, partly because the hill is not very much fun, even though I can do it, but also because the route up over the hill is hot, hot, hot in the summertime, whereas anyone who has used our trails knows that as you come off the roads and you go into the woods, it is shady and pleasant, and it really, really encourages, I think, people to be out, even in more challenging weather, not just the best days of spring and fall. And just on a final note, I absolutely am in favor of preserving nature within the city. I am a little bit puzzled how people who don't live in the neighborhood are going to be able to access the nature sanctuary, except by driving cars if we don't have a trail access. And I would think that for the neighbors, having a lot of on-street car parking and people coming there would actually be more disruptive than people just riding bikes or walking down the street to get to an attractive natural area.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Beth Cunningham. I am the secretary for the Shepard Boulevard Neighborhood Association, and overwhelmingly my neighbors up at the top of the hill are so very much in favor of getting over onto campus with this trail. Nearly everybody I talk to up in my neighborhood is in support of 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 or 1, 2, and 3 if monies are available, but certainly not 4, because none of us feel we could really utilize that one. It's not as safe for our children to take that road along Stadium, and so therefore we are very much excited about this trail. We're so glad it's finally here. It's been a long, long time coming, and we've been really waiting for this to happen. And I would like to say, if we do have monies available, if 2 could be a possible consideration at some point, because I know it will really help us in the neighborhood get over to campus, because there will be a ton of us that will be using that trail, I can guarantee it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brad Lucky. I live on Falcon Drive, 1118 Falcon, which is Shepard neighborhood. I'm one of the people that actually walks. You've probably seen me. If you haven't, you just haven't been around. And I walk up Stadium, and I hate it. Hate it. And putting a sidewalk on the side of Stadium isn't going to make it any better. That's one of the reasons I'm here. I really want you to understand that doing option 4 is not going to improve anybody's walkability to get any place. And I'm afraid if you do option 4, we're never going to have the opportunity to go back and do this correctly. And the way to do it correctly is to do option 1 and to do option 3. So I'm here to strongly tell you to go forward, do option 3. I'm going to invoke Darwin. Way back when I was a young man working at Walt's Bike Shop, I got drugged to this meeting, and there were a couple of really crazy dreamers at this meeting. Darwin was there, and there were some other people from the Sierra Club and from the Audubon Society, and they were going to build a trail on the old railroad that went out of Columbia. And they said, not only that, if we build that trail, the state will build a trail on the old railroad that goes down by the Missouri River. And someday they'll match up and they'll meet. And I'm telling you, I thought they were out of their minds because they were going to spend $1 million. Oh my God, $1 million. And there's this guy named Ted Jones, and he said, heck, maybe I'll just pay the $1 million. Said that in the meeting. And those guys, they put their money where their mouth was, and they built the trails, and we're all enjoying those trails, and we're enjoying Columbia because those guys said, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. You need to build the trails. Thank you.
Michelle Johnstone, 711 Bluffdale Drive. And first, on a very selfish note, thank you for removing a sidewalk from my front yard, or the potential of a sidewalk in my front yard. Secondly, having experienced the Hickson Creek flooding, it rises up like 18 feet up the bank and then maybe 18 feet east towards our back door. I do have concern about the flooding of if building a path along the creek on option 3, and even the potential of more flooding with the construction. So just please, I asked if those options are passed, to please keep that in mind. It floods. It floods big. And experiencing the trails in Fulton, Missouri, who built trails along the creek, it floods over, and there's, even when the water goes down, you still can't cross it because of the mud, and the city staff has to come in and clean all that gunk up to make those pathways walkable again. So thank you.
I'm Brian Johnstone, 711 Bluffdale, and everything my wife said was absolutely accurate. Someone mentioned they had a most favorite part of Columbia. My favorite part of Columbia is on my back deck looking over the backyard. And I must say, in support of the flood issue, that if you all are going to use option 1, 3, or 2, you need to have some backup money to look after maintenance of those concrete trails, because during the time that we've been on Bluffdale, which is a short time, only 3 years, I've seen the floodwater come up across our backyard. In order to get to our backyard, it has to rise approximately 20 feet. And then beyond that, the water came up another 2 feet, which brought it within 20 feet of our back door. And the current is ferocious. I would think that would undercut any heavy objects placed on that soil. Someone else had described the soil as not being stable anyhow, that it was a, I don't know whether they used the words it was on an old dump site or something, but I don't think that's true anyhow. I guess it was farmland, but the soil seems to absorb a lot of moisture and absorb the water as it goes along. But I do think it would be a challenge to keep up with that in terms of a lot of concrete paths. I also enjoy that same area, the nature area, walking my dogs, and I'm led to believe that because of park regulations, that would mean I'd have to go with a leash. I think that would be a problem with me. And lastly, I'm concerned about safety issues. The swishback situation and the swishback situation that exists at the old 63 and Hinkson Creek Bridge that swings back under there, there's a 5-inch metal post set in the middle of that trailway right at 63. If someone were having some kind of problem on that trail beyond that space,
15 seconds.
There's no way that a safety vehicle could make the turn. And as far as I can see, there's no way that a safety vehicle could get in there at all. And I think that would hold true for all the other areas that are designed for that issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tom Lindberg. I live at 606 Bluffdale, a little bit up the street from some of the previous residents who spoke. Since my wife and I moved to the neighborhood, we've dreamt about a trail connection to the campus. I work in the East Campus area. I bike to the university somewhat regularly, and I go up the hill, either coming or going to work. It is a tough ride. I'm very much in favor of option 1. I think that's the least expensive, and it's also the least impactful. There's less impact than option 3. If you do option 3 as well, or option 2, that blazes a lot through that area. So option 1 and also option 4, I think, in the future, but not at the expense of these others. I ride on Stadium. I run my bike right out there and ride right up Stadium. A lot of people aren't used to urban riding, but you get out there and do it. We walked to work the other day, and walking along there's another challenge. So I'd be in favor of both, and we'd like to be connected to that network. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Christine Dorr. I live at 2510 Brookside Court. I'm just off the Hinkson. I love the Hinkson. I've biked since I was 5 years old, and I have been waiting a long time for this trail, and that hill on 63 has stopped my family and I from getting over. We've done it a couple times, but it's not like we would love to. There's a beautiful nature area down there. I used to live over there in that neighborhood, and my daughters swing in those vines of those trees. It's beautiful, and it's a shame that our community can't embrace this opportunity so that everyone can enjoy that area. We desperately need it. We know about childhood nature deficit. We've got to get our kids out, and we're starting. We're getting out of the cars. We're getting healthier, by golly, and the world is changing. And we have to make some give and take here. A little bit of concrete now will save a lot more than in the long run. We've got to look at the big picture. I was in the Navy. I was stationed in Europe. I think of Heidelberg. I think of Sevilla, Spain. Those towns had waterways through their central districts. People were there enjoying it. Life was better because of it. And I think that this opportunity, this gem we have, that connector along this beautiful creek and the beautiful flora and fauna to share with our community is just a shining star we just can't pass up. The trillium, the dogfoot violet, the wild geranium, it goes on and on. It's all there that everyone can enjoy. Speaking of environmental damage, though, really, you know, I watched the Hinkson Creek. I invited all of you several years ago I'd give you a canoe ride down the Hinkson so you could see what we got. And you'll see some of the banks where the riparian corridor has been damaged. The honeysuckles are in there, and they are causing erosion. And it's antithetical to think that a plant with nice big roots and everything would cause erosion. But the thing is, it's the first thing to leaf out in the spring. It's the last thing to lose its leaves in the fall. Nothing else can grow underneath of it. It's raw dirt. Rain comes along, washes it away. We're losing our trees. Nothing else can grow to protect that area. So in the big picture, we've got to keep that in mind. This trail is so much more of a benefit than the immediate give and take that we have to be willing to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is John Riddick. I live at 602 Rollins Court, and I'm here to encourage you strongly to vote for options 1 and 3. We could call option 13, I guess, if you just want to lump them together, or 31, depends on which side of town you're coming from. The importance of these projects is not the length, and I think somebody else said that as well, but it's of either one of them or together. It's how they connect everything else, from the east to the west, the north to the south. I mean, it's kind of the linchpin. It's everything. It puts everything together. And if you look at this particular little part of our trail system, it makes the rest of it so much more valuable. The value add, the return on investment in this part is just tremendous, and I think we really don't want to miss the opportunity to get that done. Unfortunately, not all of us are dedicated bikers or walkers, but we like to get out. But if you add a little fun to the trip, as Ellen said, you know, that makes a big difference. She takes 10 miles instead of 7.5. And sometimes people will go if it's pleasurable, or not go if you got to drive along 740 or Stadium. So we have the opportunity, I think, with this particular project, and this one's so important, to join other communities such as Fort Collins, Colorado, Davis, California, Portland, Oregon, Boulder, Colorado, as a premier trails city in the United States. And I think it's really important that we do 1 and 3 at this time. Thank you.
Jake Giesman, 1500 Audubon, and I'd like to speak on behalf of my family. We consider ourselves environmentalists, bike commuters, recreational bicyclists, and we're in favor of options 1 and 3. We feel that that's going to have the biggest impact on us as far as changing how we make our trips into the center of town with our 8-year-old son. Option 4, we definitely wouldn't feel safe bringing him that way. Option 2 is cost prohibitive, especially considering that we have to go up the hill either way. Thank you.
Scott Butler, 1408 Audubon, and in the same vein, my family and I are avid cyclists and would use options 1 and 3 to get to downtown. The second part of it is, as a property manager with 72 units, this goes a long way to help closing a gap to where I manage property. And the common question is there a good connection? And my answer is not yet, but it's coming. And options 1 and 3 go a long way to close that gap. Thank you.
My name's Alvin Sweezer, 1377 Old North, number 7. I commute in Columbia a lot. I live out of Columbia. And hopefully they hook all the trails together, 1 and 3. It'd be really nice. You don't have to go up that big old hill. It'd make it easier for a lot of people. Thanks.
On behalf of School 705 Bluffdale, I want to thank the council and the mayor for the concern shown for the property. So I'm really pleased about removing the sidewalks on Bluffdale. However, I have to remind everybody here that we talk about transportation and non recreation. So although it's very impressive that you bring the kids, you probably don't bring the kids to work. So we're talking about so I think the main concern right now is people from Shepard, and I understand that, going to the university. I don't see how option 1 and 3 would do that. You have to go down to Bluffdale to go to take the connector, and I don't see anything mentioned about the connector across the Rollins connector. So option 2 I see like normal. You just go straight Shepard, go up the hill. It might be too steep. But I really don't understand option 3 with 2 bridges going from where? I mean, and if you take option 3 and you want to go to the university, guess what? You have to go Ashland Road. There is no other way to do it. And people, so you have to, the people that did the study, they should have probably give more weight to people, to the neighborhoods that are close to the university, right? So you talk about Bluffdale neighborhood, you talk about Shepard neighborhood, you talk about the university, the stadium apartments. Stadium apartments, they would not take there is somebody saying that should take the option 3 and go up. I don't think so. You'll take action on this way quicker. You bike up 3 minutes. And I've done this. People know I've done this thousands of times. At one point, I didn't have a car here in Columbia for 2 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Barbara Reed, I live at 615 Bluffdale Drive. I want to say right out, in case I run out of time, I'm in favor of option 4. I have a copy of the non-motorized transportation pilot program, and there's a lot of rules that are connected to, these are actually Federal Highway Administration funds. They're federal taxpayer money. One of the rules says that surface transportation program projects may not be undertaken on roads functionally classified as local or rural minor collectors unless the roads were on a federal aid highway system on January 1st. Obviously, Bluffdale, Southwood, and Woodley are not, because we can't even get snowplows down our street. They are so minor. So that violates that rule right there. Bluffdale, Southwood, and Woodley are not through streets. They end in a cul-de-sac. Many residents in that neighborhood bought property or rented with the expectation of not living on a through street. Landowner expectations in this neighborhood should be honored. In City Council, August 19, 2013, I'm going to read from the minutes. Ms. Hoppy explained she had worked with others in helping to pass the first park sales tax ballot in 2000, been a member of the PennNet Coalition for years, and was a strong supporter of trails as it resulted in a healthier community and helped the environment since people were using cars less, but believed there were issues as well. She felt consideration should be given to trails depending on new areas versus existing neighborhoods, alternative trails, trails through backyards and in the creek, especially where there might be reasonable alternatives. When the Grindstone Trail was first being designed, she worked with the neighborhood, and the neighbors had walked possible alternative trails in the Waters and Moss property, which was adjacent to the neighborhood, in order to avoid the privacy issues of the trail going through people's backyards. She understood a concern was eminent domain, which was not applicable any longer, but the privacy concerns were still there. Eminent domain would technically not be used, but this trail would be in backyards, and the neighbors had a reasonable expectation of privacy when they purchased their homes, with a bluff on one side and a conservation area on the other. Even though the trail would not technically be on their property, she did not believe they could deny that this would have a profound effect on their expectations of privacy. She said the city would be imposing the community's view on the neighbors for transportation when there were alternative routes. She noted that neighbors walked the alternative routes and were never told the Conservation Department would not allow paved trails. She felt the crux was that there were alternative routes. And I'm going to skip a little bit of this, but she said she felt it was arrogant and presumptuous for her to say the neighbors would like the trail in the future. She believed there were options and noted she would vote against the project. Option 4 is an alternative, and it is actual use of federal highway funds. Federal highway funds are getting scarce, and if we can improve the situation and make a safe walking area along that, I believe that we should go with MoDOT and use the funds for what they were intended.
Thank you.
I'm Mary Fouts, 2102 Southwood Drive. And now, if I understand it, the sidewalks are out. So the 8-foot that we're going to take away from the south side of Southwood is no longer. Good. Okay, that's good. But I did want to make a point. I hear a lot of talk about that big hill, that big 63 hill. Well, if you look at the map and you come out of Southwood Drive is on a hill. And they just mentioned the snowplows. Oftentimes, if we get a major snow, the plows don't come that. And our land, we can't get up that straight. So there is a hill there. Plus, when you turn out of Southwood Drive, and if you're going south, you still have a lot of that old 63 hill to get up. And if you're coming north, you've got a long, long hill to get up, to get down to Southwood, to get on to this option 1. So I'm opposed to option 1 because of that, and I'm in favor of option 4. Thank you.
I'm Jim Fouts, 2102 Southwood Drive. I live with her. And I'm a native Colombian, and I know there's not a whole lot of us, but I was raised on the corner of Sanford and Worley, and I rode my bike. That was my transportation. I rode my bike to Ridgeway. I rode my bike to Jeff Jr. I rode my bike to Hickman, downtown, or wherever I've gone. And we've lived on Southwood since '73, and still I ride my bike. I worked for UPS and for 32 years, so I rode my bike 63 to Paris Road, to Vandiver, to UPS. And still, I'm retired now, but if I go to the Bass Pro, I take that same route. And I like to ride the grindstone. I go up 60. I'm 74 years old, and I go up 63 and go down, catch grindstone, go grindstone to Katy Trail, come down Katy Trail and get off of Providence, and then I go the Flat Branch, and I go to up Broadway and back home, which is a nice ride for me. And I just really, I guess I'm really concerned about, spending money. Probably I'm not as concerned being a truck driver. I kind of like to smell of diesel and other fuels, but it's not hurt me in 74 years, and I think the best solution would go with Proposition 4, or Choice 4. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know in my heart that there is a way to make all the people happy. And we come with time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my friends. I'm Sue Forte. I live at 627 Bluffdale. Tonight's the big night we've been working for 8 years. It's happening right now. And you're kind and generous, and you're here, and you're listening to me, and you're listening to everyone. I also have a vision for Columbia. This is going to be my home for the rest of my life, and I want to be able to walk down the street and say, hello, how are you? And tell you that I'm glad to see you, and that we have been in this together, and we have truly listened to each other. And we have not made decisions out of urgency and, quote, money. Our vision in my community association, which I speak for, and I should have requested 5 minutes, Mayor, I'm sorry.
Sure, that's going to do any good. Go ahead.
It's very generous.
5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. We have and have held on and have done research as well as we could. We are people of different professions, but we all have one heart. We have a heart that hears our Mother Nature calling and wanting all of us to come to her And I have been so fortunate to know this property. I'm not sure all of you, and I apologize that I did not have time to take each and every one of you down to the property and show you the parts that are not declaimed not ugly and used up and just an old sewer line. Oh, there are so many beautiful parts in the forest and along the creek. I was there on Sunday, and I thought, you lucky girl. It is so quiet. That is the gift. It is soft. When you put concrete and bikes, that is hard. It is clanging. And yes, the wildlife will try to come back, but it's never the same. Our former president, who most of you knew, Jerry Wade, as I've told you before, invented option 4. I am sad to say that the representation that I'm hearing tonight of option 4, I couldn't go to the IP meeting that was at Shepard School because I had a concert to give. I was under the impression that they would put a cement retaining wall, just like they've done down Providence, just like they've done over the Hinkson Creek when they constructed the Moon Valley, that the pedestrians and the bikers would be very well protected by the retaining wall, and there would be a cantilever, very firmly reinforced fence railing, so it would be completely safe. I have not heard this tonight, and I'm also sad that option 4 has been downplayed. It has just been pretty much ignored. I want to remind you that we've worked hard for this, and we feel that it is the solution, and to open your minds to a park that is still wild. It's right here, and where would people park? They would park on Bluffdale. They would park on Valley View. You would drive your bike, you would ride your bike, there will be a bike rack there for you. I also am a little disappointed that there's a formula that all neighbors will like this. You know, one of the things when I went to Europe that is so unique about European culture is that every country is small, and it has its own country. It has its own personality, its own culture, and then they call them hamlets or villages, and they speak dialects. They have different recipes, they have different stories, and we love that. And I believe that is true in Columbia. Our Bluffdale neighborhood is its own little hamlet, and I and my friends in It's Our Wild Nature spent 3 years collecting signatures and opinions from people in Bluffdale, and we have sent those votes to you in preference of keeping our neighborhood a not go through, to keep it quiet, because we believe that the old 63 is a doable hill. Well, you've been generous with your time. I have to say that I was given a private tour by a person. I said I would not say his name. He works in one of the city offices. It constructs trails and parks. And this person said to me, it's awfully sad, Sutu, that people will not go outside unless there's concrete. This is what our studies have shown. How sad. We have a grass path that feels good. It's good for the animals. It's good for the environment. Lastly, in my last 26 seconds, I do want to say, I wanted to say hello to you and embrace you, and I truly mean this when I read you the Ho'opono Hawaiian poem that says, thank you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you all. I love you, Columbia, and we are one. And with that, I'd like to ask anyone in favor for option 4 to please stand.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Hi, my name is John Nichols. I live at 511 Hickman Avenue. Most of what's been on my mind has already been said in some form or another by most other people, so I don't have a lot to say except for just to point out that so much of the debate tonight has been on the environmental impact of this project, whether or not it will destroy a pristine environment or whether there will be significant impacts to water or flooding. And to that point, I think that's one of the deficiencies of the Trans Systems Plan, is that the environmental impact section was very short, it's just generalities. There was no numbers, no facts or figures as there was for the mode shift section. And I think that from my view as an environmental scientist and as an environmentalist, that's something that the city tends to gloss over, quantifying environmental impacts before we make decisions about development, whether it's a trail or a subdivision or whatever. So in light of the fact that I see that there just hasn't been a whole lot of due diligence done on that issue, I would first off suggest that you table a vote until you can actually have more facts and figures that we can talk about and debate that instead of emotional pleas and anecdotes from either side. If you do go through with approving these, I would suggest adding or mandating, requiring best management practices such as the use of pervious pavement or stormwater retention basements or rain gardens or other things that will hopefully effectively neutralize the stormwater issues. If you look at a 10-foot wide trail for the length that is specified in options 1 and 3, which most people support, that's about 1.3 acres of pavement, which is almost an entire city block. So there is going to be an impact, and we do need to consider that. And I hope it's considered in the city's environmental impact statement. Also, in light of the fact that this probably will get passed, why not consider doing some type of environmental mitigation project somewhere else, such as finding another piece of undeveloped land to preserve, to offset the development, or finding some piece of impermeable surface that we can convert to a natural system. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jean Skolka. I live at 6150 North Oakland Gravel Road. I've been a small business owner in Columbia for 19 years. The trail system is loved by the citizens of Columbia. It is one of the best in the nation and was a forward-thinking idea when it was created. I embrace the mission of continuing to develop the trail system. My message is not if we should proceed, but how best to proceed. My research and investigation leads me to believe that option 4 is our best choice. It provides the needed link in the bike ped system in an environmentally responsible way, and at the same time allows us to leave the Hinkson Creek bottom intact. Given the current global, national, and local challenges in environmental stewardship, maybe areas like these 35 acres as a wilderness corridor will be the next important thing for a city to have. According to the Trans System Report, options 1 and 3 create no potential for pedestrian mode shift. Options 1 and 3 will not connect to campus without additional trails. Options 1 and 3 do not really serve the Shepard Boulevard neighborhood as well as option 2, which is the most costly option in every way. None of the options eliminate the hills, as you have to go down into the valley and back out. Simply characterizing this as a not in my backyard issue is just a way of spinning the public away from the real issues here. Scientists have said that options 1, 2, and 3 would cause damage to the already impaired Hinkson Creek. This area is a wetland, and the city, county, and university are all putting a lot of effort into trying to improve the health of the creek. It seems counterproductive to create concrete trails that increase the impervious surface area and cause destructive stormwater runoff. According to the Trans Systems Report, option 1 at this time has an assumed starting point and connects to nothing, as the additional needed connection to Rollins Road does not exist. It also takes out an acre of forested land. Option 4 can provide a clear connection that can be accomplished a lot quicker, with no damage to the environment and an easy connection to Rollins Road. Additional challenges with options 1, 2, and 3 include acquiring the land. Option 4 is a solid option that provides the desired trail connection responsibly, safely, and quickly, and allows us to create the next forward-thinking idea for Columbia, a nature sanctuary. I am asking you to see the Hinkson Creek not as a barrier to campus, but as an important urban wilderness that should be preserved just as it is. Lyndon Johnson signed the Wilderness Act in 1964 to, quote, give future generations a glimpse of the world as it was in the beginning. We can no longer hope to accomplish this.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time has
Maybe
expired.
we can preserve small
Thank you.
areas for our children to learn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jonathan Sessions. I live at 115 Aldea Avenue. I'm a lifelong resident of Columbia and a very small business owner. I guess it's important for you guys to know. I am also a member of the Collaborative Adaptive Management Task Force for the Hinkson Watershed. I represent the Columbia Public Schools on that committee, and I've seen how a trail and a water retention and water management solution can go hand in hand with what's happened right there behind Forum. So I'm glad that has worked out well, and obviously projects like this are something that with city and county representatives we are obviously paying attention to and are no doubt going to keep in mind as we move forward with projects and making sure that the Hinkson watershed stays off of the impaired watershed list. I want to keep it brief. Two things deter folks from using trails, and that's connectivity and accessibility. It's pretty clear from what we've seen from the community programs, or from the community meetings, what we've seen here tonight. Options 1 and 3, clearly the best options when it comes to connectivity with the greatest accessibility. So tonight I ask you to please support options 1 and 3. Also, I'm on the bicycle boulevard right there on Aldea. I'm just kind of looking in this direction. Is that going to happen soon?
Working on the plans.
Working on the plans. All right, just wanted to make sure. I thought a great opportunity to find out. All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Carrie Gardner, 115 Aldea. Yes, we're on the Bike Boulevard, and we just want to thank you for that. We are very thrilled to have bikes rolling past our house. I'm here to speak on behalf of options 1 and 3. Trails are only useful if they actually go where people need to be. The whole idea of a non-motorized transportation program is to make those connections between where people live and where they need to end up. One place a lot of people need to end up is the Central City area, the campuses, the hospitals, and the downtown area. This is providing another key link, an easier link for people to travel to these key areas. And there's a lot of benefits that will come from that. The fact that more people are biking and walking into this area means perhaps fewer parking garages, perhaps less building, and that helps in terms of what we want to see our central city look like. I think what it also does is it has an economic benefit. What studies have found is that people who ride bikes actually are more likely to shop local. Some of it might be that they're more committed to their community. Some of it is they drive slower by the shops. But if you have a retail area that is really bike friendly and there's a bike trail, you usually see about a 40% jump in sales. So something else to think about in terms of linking up key areas of the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Lawrence Simonson, 2706 Hillshire Drive. We've been here a long time tonight talking about trails. I consider myself a multimodal dork, and I think I could talk about trails quite a bit. Even I'm starting to get a little sleepy, so I think I could do my position justice by just hurrying up and getting done. So with that, I know each and every one of you will vote in the best way that you think is best for the Columbia, and Columbia will be better for it. And so with that, I would urge you to take my position and support options 1 and 3 as the best routes for the Shepard to Rollins connector, without the sidewalk, thankfully, and encourage council to support staff in determining the best funding source to fund this route. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come to the microphone, please. We can't hear you. Pull the microphone towards you. It's flexible.
A what?
Just pull it towards you. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you.
There we go, okay. Marie Ballard, 512 Rock Hill Road. I'm not in favor of putting cement anywhere on green space. I did want to share something that was told to me about cement by Jim Aycock, head of Region 7 Hazmat Storage. He told me that they were using old hazmat to power the kilns for 2 huge cement powder to make the clinker in Missouri. It's interesting. And I confirmed that with a really industrial hygienist that I trust, and also with the lady who was at the time head of hazmat on the road. And they confirmed they're actually doing that. They're throwing in old solvent and old paint and making something that they say will all burn off. And I asked the industrial hygienist, well, how do they guarantee that there's not going to be hazmat fumes in the cement? And she said they don't. I said, so you're talking about sidewalk as hazmat storage? And she said, yeah, essentially. So that's something to know about. And if you're going to put cement trails down, I sincerely hope you get it from the big, huge one that's still going in Missouri that powers their kilns with electricity. You don't have to worry what bonds were not and not broken at what heat and what synergistic chemical things you're creating. The other thing I want to say is be very, very careful with the tree roots. When you run over tree roots with big, huge, gigantic machines, you injure them. You compact the little roots, and the trees will suffer and a lot of times die. And I was lectured about that in a really funny, sweet way by an arborist who's actually a master arborist on the East Coast. She joked about some of the big machine guys thinking that, or operators, that thinking if they didn't run over children or dogs that they were doing a great job, but she says it really affects the trees when they run over the roots. So I'm not in favor of bringing in gigantic machines to run over, the peripheral areas, because it'll show up later. And every time you tear down a tree, you tear down a neurological resource, because everybody knows that trees are carbon sinks, but not everybody knows that they're heavy metal sinks.
15 seconds.
And if you look up Google Scholar PB tree bark, and you look at the Sheffield study of what they found when they looked for lead in the trees in England, it's mind-boggling. The lowest tree was at neurological damaging level of what?
Thank you. Your time has expired. Thank you.
In a deciliter of a child's bloodstream. So careful with the trees out there.
Hi, good evening. My name is Antoinette Gray, and I reside at 715 Bluffdale Drive. And my house kind of sits in the roadway that leads up to the cul-de-sac there. I'll be just very brief here. As a Columbia native from a Cubita Tiger, I'm now a pediatric nurse and a first-time home buyer right there at that same location. And I'm also the best mother of 3 children. And I've invested completely in our home, our neighborhood, the Hinkson Creek Valley, and our city. We ride, we run, we walk. The kids are involved in Blue Thunder Track Club. Myself, I would consider myself an avid runner, and we run up Old 63 with little effort. My kiddos are actually 14, 12, and I have an 18-month-old, and he rides on the little bike buggy in front of my bike, and we get up there pretty effortlessly. In addition, I just kindly request that each of you use your professional positions to choose a system that is compassionate to the ones that it directly impacts. while allowing the access to the pristine neighborhood. Just ultimately consider the most efficient trail placement that possesses the least environmental impact on the watershed altogether. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Rick Shanker, 1829 Cliff Drive. I would just like to know the cost of the easements for all these, if you have that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, my name is Derek Newhard, live on 204 East Parkway. I support 1 and 3. And don't be swayed by emotions, be swayed by the facts. You know, the amount of storm runoff from the additional concrete is not to blame for the erosion of Hinkson Creek. It's the upstream watershed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brian Keeney. I live at 2112 Southwood Drive. I sent out an email to the mayor and the city council members. I received 3 responses from city council members. I'd like to read what I wrote, if you'll indulge me. I've lived on Southwood Drive for 18 years, and I would like to express my concern about the proposed Rollins Street to Shepard Boulevard Trail connection. I am in favor of option 4 with a sidewalk pedway along Stadium Boulevard from Ashland Road to Old 63. This would connect the new sidewalk and bike lanes on Ashland Road to the current sidewalk at the northwest corner of Old 63 and Stadium. I have heard, and this is hearsay because I don't know for sure, that the state is planning on improving the Stadium Old 63 intersection. Perhaps the city could combine forces with the state on this project or get the state to pay for all or most of the modifications along this route. My second choice would be extending Rollins Road down to Hinkson Creek and following it south to connect with the sidewalk under the bridge on Stadium Boulevard. I am unsure of option 2, which meanders through the Hinkson Creek Valley southward and up toward Old 63. Perhaps a more direct route to Old 63 would have less of an impact on its many properties. I realize you've already addressed the sidewalk issue in our neighborhood, and I appreciate that, but I'm going to continue reading. I'm strictly and adamantly opposed to option 1. The Bluffdale and Valley View subdivisions were not designed with sidewalks in mind. The front yards of these homes are too small for sidewalks. Sidewalks in these neighborhoods would leave virtually no front yards for these properties. Pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists have been coexisting in these neighborhoods for 50 years. Please vote against this proposal until a more complete study can be done, which hopefully will include more input from the citizens it impacts. I'd also like to point out that the elevation where Southwood connects to Old 63 is about 25 to 30 feet higher than it is where Bluffdale connects to Old 63. And Southwood Drive is 25 feet wide. Bluffdale Drive is 30 feet wide. So I believe a bike trail would be better on
15
Bluffdale.
seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Darwin Heineman.
Did you go 3 minutes and 15 seconds so I could say I buzzed you
3
once?
minutes. Oh, you want to cut me off? Yeah. And my address is 1223 Francis Drive before you cut me off for forgetting that.
Just lost some time, Darwin.
And I know something about listening to one more speaker who has nothing new to say. And so I thought I'd just give you a little bit of your own medicine here. But in any case, I picked up a few things that I thought were kind of interesting. Somebody said that this is a shining star, that can't pass it up, This is where the kids will get out into nature. Another said you need to put the trails where they will be useful. Another said it's a place where you hook all the trails together. And another one added that it is value added to our trail system. I think those are great quotes, and I think it kind of sums up the situation. I know that there are others who would probably be willing to speak up, but I'm going to see if we can just get them to stand. All those favor options 1 and 3, please stand. Thank you very much. How much more time do I have before you're going to cut me off?
You just went past 3 minutes.
Oh.
I apologize for the clock being wrong.
Thank you for all you do, really.
Anyone else? I'll close the public hearing. I'll go first. I'm a big fan of 1 and 3. I want to thank staff for a very detailed analysis, all 287 pages. I want to thank Annette Triplett for an excellent presentation. There's really nothing to add to the presentation she made. And I want to thank Darwin Hyman for the gift of the legacy he's given to Columbia, Missouri.
As the 6th Ward representative, and this trail is in the 6th Ward, I would like to go next and sort of give a bigger picture and a little bit of history of the area and try to address all of the concerns and the main points. This trail option, really 1 and 3, the basic option came up many years ago, and it was rejected in part. They were considering low water bridges, concerned about trails by the Hinkson, concerns about from the Shepard neighborhood and East Campus about a better connection. They were interested in the East-West connection. So we're looking at people who want to go from the east to the west, as well as the people who want to go from the north to the south, and how this connects with the overall trail system. So one of the things that happened after that trail was not passed was that representatives from East Campus and Shepard and Hinkson and the immediate the closest areas walked about 9 different options to see if we could come up with a connection that served people better, was cheaper, didn't have the concerns with flooding and the interference with the low water bridges with the kayakers, as well as there were concerns from East Campus with a paved trail going through a natural area, Clyde Wilson Park, and their trails. So I think the time has been well spent. What I've heard from people in the Shepard area, they would like a more direct east-west route. We've heard tonight that no matter where you go, if you go option 2, we were hoping that it would be less incline than it was and less expense than it is. I've heard from people in the Shepard area and East Campus who would be very happy with option 2, but they would be satisfied with option 1, which also, it's not a flat area. It does not eliminate the old 63 hill. You would still have to go up some of Old 63 to get to Southwood or even to Bluffdale. The Shepard neighborhood will have to go down Old 63 and up Old 63. So there's a bit of a hill even in option 1 for east-west people and north-south people going north and south. I've when I worked in Buttonwood and Providence and then Nifong and Forum, I would bike to work at least once a week when there was casual day. And it is tough going up Old 63. That was when I was younger. And it's tougher as you get older, and I hope to be around for my 90s or 100. And I do think over time that that hill becomes more difficult. My husband and I do, and as many people do, enjoy using the trails, and there is advantage of having the flat trail on Old 63. I've heard from not only people in the immediate area, but the larger community, and people in Shepard who, most of them do not like option 4 at all. They don't want to walk or bike close to stadium that is busy with traffic and hot, and they don't want to send their kids there. And the people that live in Shepard will still have to go up and down Old 63, and the people who are traveling through or going from Broadway Village who want to go to Grindstone will still have to go up and down Old 63. So there's a lot of pros and cons about the options. I want to address the natural area and the concerns about nature and the concerns about Hinkson and the concerns about flooding. There's a couple important points that really haven't been made. This is a beautiful area, but it is privately owned. It's not an Audubon Society owned area. It's zoned R1. Right now, it has the right, the property owner has the right to develop that property, which means putting in roads. It means putting in driveways. It means putting in homes. That's what they have a right to do. So the paved area is a very minor, the trail area is a very minor thing compared to what can be done right now with the property. What I've been working on and advocating for, because this area is really valuable to the Hinkson Creek, it's valuable as a stormwater natural area, it's valuable to nature, that it would be a good piece of property for many, many reasons for the city to acquire through its parks program for a natural area, which we have funds to, we have allocated funds not only for active parks but natural area parks. So in my mind, from listening to all the different interests, I think it's the best thing we can do to help preserve that area and meet the travel needs is to have a trail. I know, but acquire it as a park. And what I'd like to see, I was a little disappointed that option 2 came out different than we had anticipated it and more expensive than we had anticipated. And I would love to see, and I think it would be very valuable to have a walking trail, non-paved, from Old 63, option 2, to the bridge. If the city could acquire the property, that would be very useful to the Shepard neighborhood, and it would be similar to some of the great walking, non-paved trails that are in Clyde Wilson Park. So I think we can work with people who want to enhance this area, to remove the invasives, to make more natural plantings, to get people out there to enjoy the area if we can acquire it. It definitely, it's already R1. It should definitely not be rezoned anything higher, and I think the community would really be well served to acquire it. So that's sort of my hope and vision. just looking at the 6th Ward, I probably would make a motion for option 2, because that, I think, serves the 6th Ward most beneficially. But given the cost, and that I talked to a lot of people in the Shepard area who are okay, some very supportive option 1 and many okay with option 1, that I would be fine with voting for option 1 and hope that that bigger picture carries through. And option 3, I can definitely see how the connection there goes really to Grindstone. So people from Stevens Lake and Hominy Trail don't have to go up Old 63, but can go through Bluff. And, you know, the fact of the matter is people coming from the north are going to go down Bluff. You know, they have a right to go down Bluffdale. But people from Shepard, it's closer and better to go down Southwood. So I think people will take various routes. But we just need to work to really, as one speaker said, look at the big picture, and you know, you can't get everything you want, but how can you really maximize this to the community? And I guess I want to say, as a side note, I have, you know, walked this area I've lived there for 26 years and walked it with my kids, but I can only walk it in the winter because I get covered with ticks and chiggers, and my dog gets covered with them just walking in that grass. So it's inaccessible to me, and it's inaccessible to many other people. The paved trail will allow people to get into that area, but there's the whole rest of it that, if we can acquire it, is beautiful and very valuable for the community.
I want to Let me propose that we get a motion on the floor and then continue the discussion. And because we don't have a motion yet, and this is an item. So may I have a motion to proceed with 1 and 3?
I'll be happy to make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Now we'll continue with the discussion.
If I could jump in, I had to go
Go ahead.
last time after all the good points were taken.
You want to go early?
I don't have a lot to say on this, so I will be brief. There was no mode shift that came with option 4, so even though it's lower cost, it doesn't achieve what we're trying to do with the Get About funds, which is really mode shift and getting people walking and riding bikes. The options 1 and 3 does increase connectivity, that final piece, and looking forward to seeing what we can do with the available funds.
Earl?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few things. I think I'll take a little different tack here, and that is, I mean, I mentioned with regard to the other trails, the other trail that we voted on, there was a bit of a history to this. It went all the way back to 2007. Darwin remembers our discussions, and there was $13 million left over in the Get About funds to try and figure out how we would fill in the spokes of this trail wheel. And we avoided, so we did. We allotted monies to various projects. Eventually, those projects resulted in the Hominy Branch and lots of other trail projects that were somewhat less controversial. And it strikes me that there's still a bit of controversy with regard to this issue, given that it seems to be a facing off between the folks in this room between options 1 or 1 and 3 and maybe 4. And I also told you that my ideas have kind of evolved. So I have become accustomed to the idea that we lost a lot of the battles about various pervious pavement surfaces and other kinds of surfaces that had other issues that the staff was involved in. And I have become a fan of putting these trails in places that increase connectivity and to some degree increase our capacity for aesthetics and if you will, the other part of this, which is the quality of life or the recreational aspects of this. However, I'm not entirely sold, and I also still believe that there's a great deal of controversy here. This was all discussed within the context of options that did not include option 4. I will tell you outright that I'm inclined to support 4, not that I don't think that we should not have something happen in this area. Perhaps there will be some development later on. But the reason I say this is we recently went through a 2-day retreat, and we were presented with some data that suggested that we ought to maximize the bang for our buck. There were certain areas in the city, when you saw the map, the entire map of the city, that there seemed to be some areas were neglected, particularly when it came in areas, the mayor will appreciate this, public safety was on top of the list, so were roads. And it seemed to me that that dividing line was I-70 in the north and the northeast, particularly Mr. Trapp's ward and my ward, tended to be left out of this thing. And when we start talking about holes and gaps here, and frankly I think that option 4 may plug one of these gaps, at least to some degree, at least a placeholder. The biggest hole and gap, frankly, is in the north and the northeast. The only trail up there is Bear Creek, and nothing connects to it. And I can remember when we had this discussion in 2007, and there was $13 million left, and we were arguing over whether or not this trail that we are speaking to right now was viable, and we decided not to do it at that time because it was too controversial. One of the ones that came to the top was a trail along the railroad right-of-way, which would require no trees to cut down, which would connect Paris Road from the center of the city probably all the way up to the Bear Creek Trail. That is still a big hole. That's still a big gap. So I guess not only are we not going to lose anything, should we proceed with option 4? And I must admit, I'm not the expert, and I saw what the numbers were. I'm a bit skeptical of that mode shift given what's happening on the end of Stadium. But nonetheless, I think that is a route that is a viable route, and it doesn't preclude doing anything else here should that become an option. What I'm wondering is, when we prioritize these things, and the mayor asked this question about how much money was left or whether these projects would actually get built if there was enough money left in Get-About, somebody even asked the question, and maybe the staff could answer this question. I know these options were rated at about $1.7 million, the ones next to the creek. Does that include that is just $1.7 million from Get-About funds, or is there any extra public funds in terms of easements and other maintenance? Certainly will eventually be.
That's the budget that we had, yes. That's what is in the budget, is $1.7 million.
And where does it come from?
Get-About.
So all of that $1.7 million, and this will not cost any more. That's your best estimate of what this would cost, and it's all from Get-About.
For option 1.
For option 1. Yep. And what about for option 3?
Well, we got different estimates. The total between the two is about 2.5, 2.6. For 1 and 3, it's about 2.5, 2.6.
So 1.7 was allocated in the budget. The estimated costs of the estimates are about $700,000 for option 1 and about $2.2 million for option 3.
I was just trying to sort out whether or not this was entirely from Get-About or there was other additional monies that were involved in this.
Currently it is, but we're still talking to Parks and Rec to see if they have any money that's left from old projects or anything that they could possibly put toward the project as well. We haven't had that discussion yet, but we're in the process.
Well, and just one other issue, and that issue is this, that all options 1, 2, and 3 all require a high water bridge. And I know that when I walk this property, I've walked it now 4 or 5 times, first time in 2007 and since then several times, and we crossed the creek at a low water point, and we were talking about the potential for low water bridges. Now, I understand that gets DNR involved, lots of other folks if you touch the creek, which is the whole point of putting a high water span in. But we had this experience with the Moon Valley project where there was a good deal of habitat. We learned a lot from that because I think there was improvements that I alluded to before of improvements for bat habitat and so on and so forth when they put that high span bridge in there. But subsequent to that, we had another hearing and some legislation for the Grindstone Creek Trail. And Mayor Heineman and a bunch of the rest of us went out on that trail and talked to the staff with regard to putting in low water bridges rather than high water bridges at that time. And I thought that was the direction that we were going in. I guess this is the exception. But for me, that's an issue, this business about the high water bridge across Hinkson Creek. And if we develop this further, I may not prevail with this vote. I mean, it may not make any difference. But if we prevailed with another option, that would be something to consider in addition to what I'm offering you now. But the way things stand, I guess I'm going to have to take a bit of a selfish position here and try and stand up for that big gap that represents the North and the Northeast in terms of this get-about plan and filling in these spokes and wheel and suggesting that may be part of the priority that we could use if we decide not to go ahead with these very expensive options. If we decide instead to go with option 4, then that may leave more money in that pot to develop some of those other spokes. But my support is going to be toward option 4.
I'm going to make just one real quick comment. I don't think I really need to add anything new to my comments on the prior trail project we just discussed, and for that reason I will support this project as well. But I would also like to say I was very impressed by the number of young people who came to the City Council meeting this evening to exercise their rights as a citizen to speak what's on their mind. So I see most of them have left because they have school tomorrow. Unfortunately, I have work, and we have a lot of work yet to do this evening, but I think that's great, and I hope to see more of that in the future. So.
Well, I'd like to start again by acknowledging the concerns of residents of a particular area who, where a public project may happen and impacts them. And it's really important for our elected officials to weigh those concerns, which are very impactful on those people living right there, versus the concerns and the benefits for the whole city. And I do think that the city has done that over many years of looking at this project. Originally, this trail was designed to go right along the Hinkson Creek through the backyards of the houses on Bluffdale. And those are very short backyards, and in response to the concerns of those residents, the plan was changed to put it on the public street, and there's no eminent domain involved in this part of the trail. So I do feel that there has been some good balance. I think option 4 is an important project to do sometime. It's miserable walking or riding a bike over that bridge over the Hinkson Creek on Stadium, and I've done it many times, and it's unsafe. But I think that it's a lower priority than some of the other options that we've got here. And we have to look at the whole system. We have to take the big picture and the long-term view. And I think the best bit of terminology I heard was the word linchpin. And if you look at where all of our trails are and how they connect, this is a missing piece, and putting the trail in between Grindstone Nature Area and Stevens Lake Park along that low-lying valley will be inserting the linchpin that connects the whole system. It will connect to the north the extension of the Hinkson Creek Trail through Stevens Lake Park and on and on. And that trail will be going up into the 3rd Ward, Carl. And the Harmony Branch Trail, which branches off to the east and I think also goes into the 3rd Ward up to Keene Street and the interstate up there. It connects those parts with all of the trails to the south, the rest of the Hinkson Creek that passes to the south of the city, the Grindstone Trail that comes in from the southeast, and the trails to the west side. With the hill there, that is a barrier. The purpose of the Get About Columbia project is to effect a mode shift. We have seen a creditable mode shift so far, but this is a barrier. It's a real barrier. There are a lot of student housing units and destinations, shopping to the northeast and to the southeast of this area, and then there's the whole campus and downtown Columbia area to the west. And the options 1 and 3 will create a Y, a sideways Y, that will connect all of that together, and I think that the mode shift will be very substantial. I think we should be very thoughtful about the flooding issue and do appropriate studies. And I'd love to talk with experts more about this, but I still don't really understand how a 10-foot wide strip of impervious surface is going to have a significant impact on a whole area. Parking lot, absolutely. Large, flat-roofed building, absolutely. Driveways and roads that are 30, 40, 50 feet wide sometimes, sure, they catch an enormous amount of water, they pick up all kinds of pollutants, the water runs off in a great big deluge and hits the softer earth and carves, erodes the earth. But I don't think that a 10-foot wide cycle path with no appreciable pollutants on it is going to be substantially damaging to the area. So I will be supporting options 1 and 3, but I'll also be supporting a lot of It's Our Wild Nature's vision. That is a tremendous opportunity there to preserve that piece of land, to restore it to its natural state with more natural plantings, to create an educational exhibit there for children and students at the university and community members to learn about the natural ecology of the area, and having access with the bike path and walking path that will go along the very edge of that area closer to the creek will actually open it up to more people, and more people will gain an understanding of these environments and support for protecting more environments in the future. So I support 1 and 3. I'd like to add to the motion the request that staff give us some options for finding the funds. The $1.74 million is insufficient to build both.
Well, I think that goes with that's understood. I mean, we're asking staff to come back with, if the money is not there, they will come back with us with a list of possibilities, which may involve priorities.
And then the other option
follows.
The other option I'd like you to look at, and there have been some discussions about that, is whether there's a possibility to have the section from Rollins down to the creek on the west side of the creek go a little further south and possibly eliminate one of the high water bridges by connecting and having that bridge further south, or really in between the two southerly bridges as currently drawn.
Right. We'll have to look at the west side. We haven't even looked at the west side of the creek yet and how that's going to.
And that'll depend on university desires, because it's on their property. But I understand they may have changed their position from a few years ago.
It's just, if you get farther south, it gets to be a really steep bluff on that one side.
Realize we can't go that far south. All right.
All right. We have a motion second to approve 1 and 3. Had discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The motion passes 5-1. Let's have a 5-minute break.